Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show, we're talking about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Black Lightning. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Obviously, picking up where last week's episode left off, we have Jennifer with her new body, and obviously everyone trying to take it in. Everyone else kind of takes it better than Jeff, because Jeff is the one that has the hardest time, because he's the one like, no, there's got to be something wrong. What happened? Could have been this, could have been that, but it's like, no, everything turns out okay. Even her DNA is the same. Jeff is the one that kind of keeps making excuses, and I think it's because, for one, it's like, something happened to my baby girl, this couldn't be right. Like, he thinks, I think more so than anything, because whether they kind of took it back last episode or not, I think maybe what Lynn said last episode does get to him, that, whatever Jennifer's situation is currently, it's his fault. He blames himself, like, I wasn't there realizing, like, what she was going through, so I couldn't help her when she needed me most, so he feels like he failed her in that regard, so he's kind of a little distant, because he's like, nah, there's got to be something going on here. I even thought it was interesting. He was like, maybe it's not Jen. He's like, I didn't feel her, but that's also maybe it's like almost like the frequency of like what her existence is. I mean, she was able to kind of phase through, when everything happened during Crisis, she was basically able to phase through and like interact with versions of herself from different Earths. So, I think maybe like her frequency is now a little different. That's a thing, because people from different Earths do have different frequencies, but also like her DNA is the same, but everything else about a lot of other aspects about her has been reconstructed. So maybe on that level, her frequency on this Earth kind of resonates a little differently. So that's why Jeff couldn't feel her, because he's attuned to the certain, more, I guess in this case, more specifically her energy, like being one specific way. It's been like he's been attuned with that for so long, because he's had his powers for so long. So Jennifer's always read a certain signature wise. So now that signature is shifted, that's why he can't feel her anymore. But it is Jennifer. But I did like him being like, honestly, it's not the craziest thing. He's like, I traveled across the universes. I fought alongside Superman. It's like, yeah, the multiverse and everything. So we've seen, obviously, Earth doppelgangers that don't look exactly the same as their other Earth counterparts. It's not like that's something new in this continuity, but it's actually interesting he brings that up. I thought it was fascinating. I mean, technically speaking, once again, still don't know where we are in the timeline, because, once again, always have to circle back to it. Crisis on Infinite Earths ended with the multiverse spreading back out again. Once again, like a lot of the other DC shows, Titans, Doom Patrol, Stargirl, all take place on different Earths, but it's not clear whether or not the continuity, the current timeline of where we are with a lot of the shows, it's not clear whether they've caught up to the point where the multiverse is spread out again. I feel like if any show was really going to dabble and dive into that, it would be The Flash, because that's kind of where that's exactly where the multiverse started. So you'd assume they'd make a point of being like, whoa, the multiverse expanded out again. That you'd assume. So I feel like until the Flash really pays attention to that, it isn't clear that we're in the multiverse spreading out again phase. Whatever the case may be, it was just kind of something that's still kind of like, they haven't quite answered that, because they were still treating it like everything's still on just this one Earth. But regardless, not like a nitpick or anything. It's just like a clarification that I'm curious about, like when they're going to actually fully clarify that or not. But nevertheless. But Gambi and everyone else still trying to tell them, no, that's Jennifer, that's Jennifer, that's Jennifer, that's Jennifer. Obviously, they have to, because also there came up the question of, like, how are we going to handle this? Like, she's like, what about my friends? What about schools? Like, yeah, that asking us, you can't go around being Jennifer Pierce anymore. So, but even later on, TC's able to hook her up with, like, him being able to have access to what he does. It's like, oh, yeah, because it's like, Lynn is like, oh, yeah, this is my niece, JJ, because I have a daughter named Jennifer. Like, yeah, she's just JJ, so it's not confusing. I was like, oh, yeah. And she's like, oh, bye, auntie. I was like, oh, that's going to be weird. Going to have to live your entire lives, like, potentially like that. Like I said, who knows if there's, because even the way Gambi was saying it, like, oh, there's no reversing this. This is the way Jennifer is. Which I'll get to that in a second. But like I said, I like that TC was kind of like helping get her, like, birth certificate, new identity, social security number. And he makes a Good Times reference. And Luckily, someone pointed it out to me because I didn't think about it's like, oh yeah, they're references, even though they're the same age. I was like, right, I forgot he's a pod kid. So, of course, his references are going to be stuck in, like, the 70s and stuff like that. I was like, right, that's kind of what he grew up knowing. So, it's like, of course, his references are going to be stuck there. And it's like, because she's in like, oh, you need to get some updated references. I was like, right, you're a pod kid. I completely forgot that literally 30 years of your life is gone just because you were in a pod. I forgot about that. Because they don't bring it up enough, but I guess it's like, yeah, we'd expect you to remember. You're dealing with me and my terrible memory. But getting really quickly on the Jennifer front, I thought it was really interesting how they explained it basically. Because her DNA being exact, but the genes, when they don't always like, because in your DNA is so many different factors of who you could be. Like, oh, maybe you have a small percentage, like something in your genes means you have the genes to have blue eyes or green eyes or darker skin, yada, yada, so on and so forth, like certain aspects about yourself. Like, I wonder if she's technically the same age or she's older. I mean, maybe she's the same age because they point out the fact is also you're taller now too. So I think that's so interesting, like, these aspects about her. They're like, oh, rather than it being like, because all that was already in her DNA, it's just, it's interesting how DNA works because you just happen to look the way you do, but, like, move stuff around and just, like, the randomness of the world, it's like, you can come out looking completely different, hence why she looks the way she does now. So I think that's so fascinating. So it's all her attributes now were in her DNA or her genes. It's just like now when they came back together, they represented themselves in a different way. So I just thought that was so fascinating. It was like their explanation of like why this happened to her. Like it is just like nobody did anything wrong. It's just like her genes manifested themselves and pulled certain attributes to make her look the way she does now. So I thought that was really fascinating. On the Lynn and Jeff front, once again, it's like every time it seems like, man, we're taking a step forward. It's like, I feel like we take 2 steps back. It's like, man, they have like the most honestly messed up relationship. I mean, to be fair, it's with everything they're juggling and dealing with, it's not the easiest thing. This new Jennifer situation, Lynn's addiction, Jeff kind of going through his own struggles. Like everyone's going through their thing at the same time, and it leads to a lot of clashing because it's just like Jeff does not handle things the right way because obviously one of Lynn's patients this episode was Val, and it's like, oh, I didn't realize she was the person with ALS that he was talking about, which I thought was like, it's so interesting. Like I guess it makes sense in the grand scheme of things, but I'm like, why is she so important to you? Like, I don't know. I mean, especially like the conversation she had with Red last episode and stuff. Like, I don't know. Because even like Jeff kind of pointed out, oh, this is supposed to be your new cyanide and so forth, So it's like I have the replacements to your left and right hands that you lost a little while back. So I wasn't sure what her necessary purpose was. I didn't realize she was something on the meta human level side of things because it's not just ALS in her DNA, it's her meta gene. And I'm curious if that's what Tobias more so wants Lynn for. It's not just curing her ALS. Maybe he's hoping to, she might not be awakened as a meta. It might exist in her DNA, but she might not be a meta. I don't know if they've brought that up. Maybe they haven't. I'm just not remembering, like, latent meta genes, because the way they're talking about it makes it seem like it's active. Because it probably, because they can find stuff that's latent in your DNA without it necessarily being active. But I feel like them making a point of it makes it seem like it's active. She hasn't displayed any powers, but maybe it's something she's unaware of, but maybe Tobias is. And maybe that's what the whole point is. Like, I think at the end of the day, he wants whatever meta gene she has. Because obviously, Hassan meets up with Black Lightning and lets him know about the bullet because Gambi figured out the trajectory of the bullet wasn't from someone on the ground. It was actually someone far away. And it's like, oh, we're looking for someone with magnetic powers. And now we're like, all right. So now we kind of understand what Red can do. Because at first I was wondering if it was telekinesis, but it's specifically magnetism. He's literally kind of like a DC Magneto to a certain extent. Actually kind of, that, you don't need a gun when you have a magnetic bullet. You can just shoot like 4 miles away. So, because when the bullet was actually still in its casing. So I thought that was such a fascinating development. But now, like I said, it gave, because I was curious the entire time. All we kept doing was seeing Red flip and hover that coin. I'm like, is it like, like I said, my go-to was like, is it telekinesis or what? And now we got a full extent of what he's capable of. It's magnetism. So, and once again, it begs the question, what can Val do then, if that's what Red can do? But now we know Red's the assassin and not Val. But Jeff was like, all right, then the only way we're going to know what her power is if, either she displays it or someone uses a meta booster of her power, which Jeff was like, all right, get on top of it. It's like, well, no, like I've restructured those so they only work for humans. Okay, then use it. It's like, well, the only person who can use it's be me, and I'd be the only viable test subject. Okay, and she's like, wait, what? You're willing to cross that line of like, my sobriety? It's like, well, yeah, but this is Tobias we're talking about. I was like, oh, so that's more important than my sobriety. It's like, no, that's not what I meant. She's like, no, just get out. And it's like I said, one step forward, like 2 steps back. It's like, it's just because Jeff is kind of like, because it is extremely hypocritical. You're up here judging her, saying all this about her using meta boosters, but now you're all about, no, use the meta boosters when it benefits you, because it's like, oh, I'm only going to get you to smoke a little, it's like, I just need you to taste this little bit of heroin, even though you have this addiction, like, just taste a little heroin. I just need you to taste it, and then we can kick it the next day. It's like, that's what you're treating that like, and for her, it's like, I'm literally struggling to deal with that, and you give me so much grief about it, and now you want me to just like, oh, pop it, like, oh yeah, because it's for Tobias. It's like, once again, when it comes to Tobias, he always has blinders on, but it is a thing of him and Lynn were talking about like 2 episodes ago, like, we need to do whatever it takes to take Tobias down. So it's kind of, once again, he has blinders on when it comes to Tobias. Like, that's all he can focus on, especially because Tobias is running for mayor. It's like, oh, you got rid of the mayor, so now that you could, he's all about power and position, and now that he's representing himself as a pillar to the community, he kind of always has, but even more so now, oh, I can run for mayor, I'm being there for you guys. Hey, I'm helping dole out these DEG weapons, man, those metas, they're the reason why Mayor Black is dead, all the chaos that's happened, man, we need to take down those metas. So there's that whole side of things. So some other things I haven't really touched on and I thought was kind of pretty neat is it makes sense out of anyone that Grace would be there for Jennifer to tell her, like, it's okay, like, yeah, you might have a different face, but you're still you. Because she's like, yeah, like, you'll get used to it. It's like, obviously for Grace it's a little easier because it's like, hey, I you could always turn back, like in her case, but it's like, yeah, but there were times when she was stuck and was freaked out, but it's like at the end of the day, at the core of who you are, no matter what you look like on the outside, you're still the Jennifer we all know and love on the inside, and your family's waiting for you. I thought that was kind of nice, because I thought that, especially Grace being a part of the family, it's as much her sister now as Jennifer is Anissa's, so especially for her, like, family's never been something she's really had. It's never been a stable situation for her. For now, she's brought into the Pierce family. Granted, not all of the Pierce know, because Anissa did tell Jennifer, but it's like, hey, like, we're going on our honeymoon, and when we're done with our honeymoon, I'll tell my parents and everything, so everyone would know. Well, obviously that includes Gamby as well, so I thought that was a pretty interesting element. I even love them cracking jokes about, like, what you want to watch? You want to watch Big? You want to watch Freaky Friday? 13 going on 30? Oh, how about Face Off? I'm like, I like that. Like, I like that they can, like, poke fun and make fun of the current situation, that despite everything, it's like that you're still my sister, and we can still joke and make fun of each other and stuff like that, especially this weird, crazy circumstance they find themselves in. I mean, their lives have been weird and crazy before. This is some next level stuff, so I just thought that was, like I said, an interesting element to the whole thing. Some other interesting elements to this episode was the whole Lala thing, him trying to get back at Destiny for betraying him, but it's like, she's like, yeah, you were going to try and betray me first, like, you weren't down for this truce to begin with. But she has an assassin showed up, Ishmael, who him and Lala go toe-to-toe, and he proceeds to kick Lala's ass, and Lala's like, I can't die. I was like, oh, you can, and you will, and ends up putting him in cement, and it's like, now you're going to be encased in this. It's going to be your tomb. You're going to come back to life, die over and over and over again forever. Which kind of actually reminds me a little bit of Gotham, where, like, Oswald had Ed encased in ice in the Penguin Lounge, or the Ice Lounge, whatever he called his club at the time. Like, it kind of reminded me a little bit of that. But what was interesting is, it's like, oh yeah, like I hear that you got to pack up and go, right, Ishmael? Well, I heard that you're trying to get into the League of Assassins. Like, right, so where is that? Where does that currently stand? Because obviously there was someone trying, like, because obviously Nissa broke up the League of Assassins. I think if I remember correctly, it's been a while. I want to say the last time they popped up, wasn't it Nissa and Talia working together? Because there was that person who was trying to resurrect, because obviously there was still those other Lazarus pits that like Nissa, Thea, and Roy were dealing with. I'm curious what changed post and pre, like what changed post crisis, whether any of that was touched. Because like I said, I think they were trying to like join forces to potentially stamp out any of the league. So obviously that's still a thing, I believe. Like I say, it's been a while, so I don't remember necessarily where all of that was, whether they had resolved that at the end of Arrow or not. I think that was still an ongoing thing about like stopping that lady who was trying to like resurrect, and it's like, oh, you guys don't want anything with the league, fine, I'll be the one to take control of things, I'll be the one to kind of lead this new regime of the league. So I think that potentially ties in that regard, I would think. But I thought that was kind of neat. It's like, wow, we haven't heard the League of Assassins name in a while. So it's kind of pretty dope to find out, like, oh, he's trying to, like, get in the league, and he has to kill 100 metas, and he's up to, like, 94. And it's like, oh, Destiny's like, well, I need you to kill these other metas, that being, obviously, Jennifer, Grace, Anissa, and Jeff, you know, obviously in their superhero personas, because she doesn't know their real identity. So I just thought that was kind of an interesting development. I'm curious if there's going to be any saving Lala. Like, I mean, probably not. He's kind of going to be stuck in their circumstances until someone potentially sets him free. Whether that ends up being Jeff or somebody else, who knows? I wonder, is that going to play any part? Because obviously I know Tobias would love that. Be like, oh, finally got Lala locked down and everything. It's like, I'm sure he'd really enjoy that. So I don't know if there's going to be any necessary crossover in that regard. But another side of things is the whole situation with Gambi getting close to obviously the head Amanda Vista, and obviously kind of like the sad situation is because obviously he gave her that board. It's like, oh wow, it's like it's sentimental. She's like, oh yeah, this is the board you recreated from memory of like, oh, the board I beat you. It's like, yeah, like he's like, you were like one of the few people outside of someone from Japan to ever actually beat me. Specifically, no, he said like anyone, like only people. She's the only non-Japanese person to ever beat him at the game, and it's sentimental and stuff like that. But granted, he's just using it to like scan her like eye or whatever. The kind of, I guess it's his way to kind of be able to sneak in there because he's replicating her eye so that he can like sneak in there, because obviously all the stuff, was it plutonium or whatever? Probably not. Maybe that he was saying like that access to core to the energy weapons, and she's got like a large stockpile, so he's probably going to try and compromise that or something. But he actually feels bad because it's like, yeah, like they did have something in the past, but for him, he's willing to go this far to protect not just his family's life, but also everyone's lives, because a lot of people will die because of like these DEGs. So for him, it's for the greater good, but he does, it doesn't make it easier manipulating someone who does obviously care about you, and you obviously care about too, but it's like protecting people is more important. So it's kind of like, got to put my feelings aside and got to do what's necessary. So it's going to be tragic when that whole situation gets revealed, whether she finds out first or whether Gambi ends up revealing it to her, because he knew that he probably couldn't get her to back down otherwise, just because this is too profitable of a thing. But, you know, we'll see how things kind of play out on, ultimately play out on that front. I didn't talk about this either, but I should have brought it up. I thought it was a really interesting thing is obviously like TC had showed Jennifer like all those messages, because obviously she has it in her head just like, if I show up as lightning, people are going to look at me a certain way, just because it's like, right, I'm the one that's I'm lightning, I'm the bad guy and stuff like that. I destroy property, I kill people. But then he showed her like some of these videos of just like people hitting up her, like her social, giving her messages about like how she's impacted their lives in positive ways. So it's like, don't let what people say about you drag you down. Like, you are important. You give a lot of people strength, just like Black Lightning gives a lot of people strength and hope. Because even Hassan was like, are you going to disappear again? He was like, nah, I'm around for good this time. So I thought that was kind of a neat element. And I did like that she joined up with Jeff, which obviously, sadly, you know, Lopez is enacted like a no-knock warrant, which is like obviously the worst for thing. Obviously, we've seen the implications of that in the real world, and obviously this episode being a commentary on that. We even see like how the downside of that and what, you know, showing us the reflection of it. I don't, you know, in the TV show, but also rewinding it, showing like what could have happened. But luckily, Black Lightning was there. Just like how easily, you know, something like that can go so wrong. Once again, we've seen that sadly in real life. So, but obviously the cops show up to take out Jeff, but luckily the Jennifer shows up in her new outfit because, you know, Gamby had something prepared for her, but she's like, how'd you know I'd be here? Because he's like, that's what Jen would do. Jen, and it's like, because I know you so well. Like, I knew exactly, you're not going to sit idly by. You know, she can't wear an old suit anymore because it doesn't fit her. She's too tall now, but he's going to be working on a new nanotech suit. I'm sure very soon. I'm wondering, is it going to be the exact same design, or is it going to be a new design like Jeff's nano suit was? I'm curious. But she's kind of got like almost like a Blackbird thing going on, but I think it's a suit that kind of like helps, kind of much like Jeff's suit, it helps regulate his power. I think hers kind of does the same, because as she was floating down, like the centerpiece of it was kind of glowing, so I think that kind of helped her like I said, control her energy output. So, but at the end of the day, she's like, oh, you're going to ground me? And he's like, no, like, I'm glad you were there for me. Sadly, I wasn't there for you. But she was like, you went to the ionosphere and risked your life to get me, so I didn't even thank you. He's like, you're my daughter. Like, you should never have to thank me. I love you. Obviously, it's still just kind of a thing of like, you know, her looking different. It's still going to take some getting used to, like, that things have changed. So much has changed in many different regards. So, you know, wishing things would stay the same, but sadly, they can't and won't. What's interesting, though, is obviously Tobias now knows of, oh, this new Pierce, JJ, that's in town. Obviously not knowing that that's obviously Jennifer, but obviously for him, I think he's going to try and probably take advantage of this situation. Like, oh, new Pierce in town. It's going to be all the more sweeter when I break this family in many different regards. So it's going to be interesting to see where things kind of go on that front. Hell, where all of this ultimately ends up taking us, especially with Lopez handling things the way she has, like, you know, once again, it's coming from that position of you want to try and do good, but you're going the most extreme route. You're not trying to find some middle ground. You're just kind of, it's all or nothing type of mentality she's kind of having. And, you know, now I'm sure this is going to, in the public eye, is going to make Black Lightning look bad, as well as this, you know, obviously they not knowing it's lightning, but, it's going to make them look bad because they attacked cops, but also it's going to be probably the pendulum is probably going to swing the other way by being like, yeah, but they busted in someone's place, so there's going to be pushback against that. So what that necessarily all entails and what that looks like going forward is definitely going to be interesting to see, like I said, how it all ultimately ends up playing out. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.